Welcome back, everyone. Next, we have Maritime Launch is building Spaceport Nova Scotia, a commercial spaceport located near Canso, Nova Scotia. Maritime Launch is trading on the CBOE Canada under the ticker MAXQ and on the OTCQB as MAXQF. We're going to start with the video. Roll it.
Every day, we go to space when that pitch goes well, when the client calls back, when Emma orders pizza. But space is more than just an emoji. The global space economy is skyrocketing, expecting to reach $1 trillion per year by 2040. The time to invest is now. Spaceport Nova Scotia is Canada's first commercial spaceport, the only commercial launch site in North America, ready to help solve the planet's greatest challenges, taking your portfolio to new heights.
We have Stephen Mateer, the founder, president, and CEO of Maritime Launch Services, the visionary and driving force behind the development of Spaceport Nova Scotia, a world-class commercial space complex that has launched Canada into the global space industry. So happy to have you on our conference today, Steve. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Really a pleasure to be here as well. And I have to say, we fit the bill when it comes to, emerging industries and in this global market that we're working in right now. I would love to share a bit of a presentation with you and then happy to take some questions. So,
perfect. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So Spaceport Nova Scotia, we're located, as Anna mentioned, in the northeastern tip of the province of Nova Scotia, hanging out over the top of the North Atlantic and looking south and east into nothing but wide open ocean. The location the building a spaceport is really about what the market opportunity is. So first and foremost, as an emerging company in an emerging market, it's best to really talk about what that opportunity is. The space economy at the end of 2022 was estimated by Euroconsult to reach $464 billion in that 1 year. And it is set to grow to $1 trillion within the next 5 to 6 years. So it's really an amazing sector that's growing really fast. And it all boils down to building satellites on the ground, getting them into space, and doing things with them in space. There's an estimated 24,500 satellites already approved for launch in the coming years. There's an additional 50,000+ satellites, according to the FCC, that they're looking for the approval for the applications to put additional ones into orbit. So within that $464 billion a year industry, $10 billion of it is launch. And when you look at it in that kind of perspective, you realize the whole entire bottleneck is building a satellite on the ground and getting it into orbit. So that $10 billion sector is really the backbone of the entire industry. So there are hundreds of companies that are building these satellites to do all kinds of amazing things in space, whether it's near-Earth imaging, global broadband, and those kinds of things. And they really need to be able to get them into orbit in order to see their businesses succeed. So these satellites, they have to get up there in order to provide global broadband, near-Earth imaging, and the like. And it's that data stream that they're providing, those services that they're providing are the end item that is really making this economy boom. So that's what the opportunity is for us, is we've got the location, and now we are trying to bring in launch vehicles to operate from our site. We've been working with dozens of them that are coming online over the last few years and coming up, as you can see in this chart here. These are just a number of them that are in the industry today. We've got letters of intent with a couple of these companies and looking at adding a couple of more that want to set up shop at our facility. So why is our facility unique? When you look in North America, for example, there aren't any other locations that are commercial entities that have any bandwidth, if you will, to be able to launch to the cadence that's needed. There are 4 basically in Virginia, Space Coast of Florida, California, and Alaska. And the one in Florida in particular is booked up. They're launching twice a week. They can't launch anymore. But what you'll notice in this image here is all that ocean to the right, to the east of the United States. That's where you really want to be to launch your satellites into orbit with these rockets that are going over the open ocean. So the two on the West Coast, while they're viable locations, the only place they can truly launch to is due south from those sites. So they're very limited in what they can do from those facilities, and the facilities on the East Coast are just busy and unable to keep up with the throughput. SpaceX is launching up to twice a week these days. So what we have is 335 acres, fully approved from a regulatory perspective. The environmental assessment is completed. We've got a 40-year land lease. We've got significant amounts of local infrastructures, a deep sea port, international airport, international highway, all these things that add that logistics ability to get these launch vehicles and satellites to our site. We've got excellent government support, both from the federal and the provincial government, including some reimbursement programs already acknowledged by the provincial government that help us with our infrastructure. And it is truly that optimal launch location. And I can't stress that enough. These satellite clients, when they want to put their stuff into orbit, they're not putting them into geo orbits anymore around the equator. They're really putting them in the north-south and off of north-south inclinations, essentially over the ocean where we have that sweet spot. So it is arguably the best location in North America to be able to launch these rockets into orbit, to deliver these satellites where these customers want and when these customers want them. So our facility is really going to be set up. We're under construction and things are moving forward. But over this next year, we're really anticipating building on the accomplishments of 2023 and getting the rest of this facility up and running to support orbital launches in 2025. We'll do suborbital launches in 2023, in 2024, but then follow that with our first orbital launch in 2025. And the goal of this is really about getting that final infrastructure in place. The model that we're using, consider it like an airport. So we're the airport, and these launch vehicle owners are like Air Canada or United Airlines or whomever leases space at that facility to be able to get their passengers off and on their aircraft. In our case, it's getting satellites off and on these launch vehicles before they're launched into orbit. So it's that lease model that we're following. And the beauty of that is all the cost and risk associated with building a rocket is on the launch vehicle developer. What we have to do is, for a fairly small amount of money, get our facility ready to support these launchers to be able to use our facility. So it's actually fairly low cost for us to be able to get fully operational. Many of these launchers are containerized that can really get out to our facility quite easily with minimal amounts of infrastructure, so we can get them up and flying. As I mentioned, we do have construction underway. Through the end of last year, we got the initial roads completed, a small pad poured, and actually did a suborbital launch last summer, demonstrating our ability to work with our federal partners to clear the airspace, clear the waterways, get this small launcher, a suborbital rocket launched, and demonstrate that we have the expertise and the skills to be able to do all those things that are needed. From a global perspective, looking at any other places around the Earth that there might be competitors, you have to look, of course, in Northern Europe. The UK has an island off the coast of Scotland. Sweden, Norway have sites. Australia has a site. New Zealand has a site. And these locations have their benefits and they have their detriments with regards to weather, with regards to accessibility, with regards to, remember, the launch inclinations, where they can put them into orbit. The bottom line is you can't overfly people. So there's limited places that they can launch from those places. And then just the logistics of getting satellites from the US and North America, where frankly, most of the satellites on Earth are made, delivered to those places, and working through all those logistics makes it rather prohibitive to use those sites. So we're really in a sweet spot, not only within North America and offering to provide overflow capability to Cape Canaveral, replacement if they have a Category 5 or something like that, but we're also in a place that we really provide a much more easy access compared to the other global locations. So we're really in a unique place in North America to be able to serve this burgeoning industry. So competitive advantages is we are fully environmentally approved and licensed to launch up to a 5-ton rocket. We're looking at 2 smaller vehicles. 5 tons basically is the size of the capacity of the satellite payload that we're carrying. So we're looking at the small launchers that can carry, 1 ton initially, and then building out to get to the larger launchers in the years ahead. But we can launch these satellites into the orbits that our customers want. We have extensive road and rail access, as I'd mentioned. We have a seaport that's less than a mile from our front gate in the Strait of Canso, and a superport just down the road. We have really excellent weather. There's 150 launchable days per year off this coastal climate here in Nova Scotia. And it is certainly much milder weather than many of our competitors are some are actually within the Arctic Circle, North Sea, some are in deserts, some are in jungles, frankly. And ours is a sweet spot in Nova Scotia, Canada's ocean playground, perfect place to want to come and be. We've got really positive and wonderful, strong support from the Canadian government. I don't know if you saw the tweet from Minister Rodriguez last week with Transport Canada, touting the launch capabilities coming their way out of Canada. But it's just one piece of the small amount of the overall support we're getting from the federal government here, as well as the provincial government. The provincial government, of course, have given us a 40-year lease. They've leased us the 335 acres we're using. They've put in place a government reimbursement program that covers 25% of the infrastructure that we're building in place and reimburses us for it. And we're really a short distance. So when you look at the fundamentals of what we need to get going, we've got all the right pieces in place. As I mentioned, the lease launch model that follows the airport model is kind of the best way to look at it. Using a small lift, it takes a very little infrastructure to be able to get it in place. And as I said, the launch companies are going to be paying for their specific pad developments. We're just paying for the development around the facility itself. Phase 2, of course, in the years ahead, will be fully operational, revenue generating within the next 12 to 15 months with the orbital program, expecting to see some revenue generation with our suborbital program later this year. And as we carry this thing forward, and these other medium launchers that are in development in industry right now are looking for a home, we'll look to add in a couple of those launch vehicles, potentially looking at up to 4 launch vehicles that we will probably host here and launch from our spaceport. The lease and revenue model for the phase 2 shows a very strong EBITDA as well. And again, it's a nice progressive step. This is not a build it and they will come. This is build what they need. Let's get up and get launching. Let's add to the facility, and we can bring in other launchers down the road as we go. But it's that idea that we've got this massive market out there opportunity. We've got this sweet spot in Canada, in Nova Scotia, got all the permits in place, construction is underway, and we're just really anticipating a significant 2024. So as I'd mentioned, we did a successful launch last year, 2023, and we are going to do a multi-launch suborbital campaign this year. This will continue to develop our team. While we're doing that, we're looking to build out our facility, especially starting in spring, to ramp up, to be able to support the small launcher program and getting our first site lease in place sometime in 2024, and getting that first orbital launch in early 2025, and then looking at ramping up to 8 to 16 launches per year with the first launcher, similar for the second launcher, and then looking at the medium class launchers in 2 or 3 years down the road as we progress. So really the fundamentals are all there. There's massive market demand for what we're doing. There's a real gap in the availability of spaceports at this point. And there aren't a lot in that you can find in North America or around the globe that you could easily do within a 5 to 7 year time frame. We've got a high return on investment for this lease and launch model that we're working on. There's a low capex required to achieve those orbital launches that we're working towards. The best location from, if you're a satellite client, this is where you want to launch from. You can reach all the orbits that you need to from this one location in Nova Scotia. Again, that strong provincial and federal support for what we're doing, and really particularly pleased with the high-powered team that we've built. Robert Feuerbach runs our U.S. operations in Washington, D.C. Yaroslav is our Chief Technical Officer. Donna Lawler provides strategic advice on space law. Former president of the Canadian Space Agency, Sylvain Laporte, is on our board of directors. Obviously, Jeff Mamber, extremely well known with Voyager Space, is our strategic advisor as well. And retired Colonel Lee Rosen, strategic advisors, worked on spaceports at Vandenberg and in Florida for multiple decades as a government and as a SpaceX employee. Really pleased to have this amazing staff that's helping us do this. Really kind of a shotgun approach of information, to a lot to get to in about 15 minutes, but certainly happy to take some questions.
Great job, Stephen. There is a lot there. First of all, talk about why your location in Canada is ideal for a rocket launch.
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a bit earlier. The idea that the satellite clients want to put them into orbit, north-south, polar type orbits, we can launch there. If they want to put it at an inclination, more easterly towards the coast of Africa or towards Europe, we can also achieve that there. At the end of the day, rockets will really never achieve a level of safety that you can launch them over land and be able to safely drop stages and those kinds of things, or if you have a bad day. So you really want to have that coastal location where you can launch those rockets and put them into the orbits that the clients want. So if you look at the client base that's out there, satellite companies, OneWeb and Telesat, et cetera, and where they want to put their satellites into orbit, we're really serve that sweet spot of where they want to go.
And a follow-up question with this topic from Keith Delgado. How important is location in your business? And please explain why.
Well, that's it. I mean, location. If you're on an island in the North Atlantic and you're on the wrong side of the pond, there's only limited places you can launch. It's difficult to get the satellites and the rockets there, the logistics associated with it. So when that adage about location means everything to our satellite clients, means everything to the industry where most of it is in North America. Most of the rockets and most of the satellites are made in North America. And then the easy access with a relationship between Canada and the US, having a deep sea port, an international highway and rail system and international airport, all very co-located to where we are. And we happen to be in this beautiful ocean playground for Canada. It is really all about that location that makes the big difference.
So we hear from satellite operators that the backlog to launch satellites in the U.S. is extreme, with waiting lists as long as multiple years, even though launch sites in the U.S. are launching multiple times per week. So will Spaceport Nova Scotia add extra launch capacity for these satellite developers?
Yeah, that's it exactly. This site isn't going to take away any of the capacity capabilities from other sites. We're not looking to steal market from other places. The market is growing that much. It's for almost 500 million $500 billion a year, headed for $1 trillion a year. That speaks to the number of satellites that people are wanting to put into orbit. So the idea is that, if all things remain the same, there's still going to be a significant demand beyond what the current launch sites are able to meet at this point. So we're looking at a 3 to 5% market share to reach that launch tempo for a couple of launchers at 10 or 15 times a year.
David MAXQ asks, is there still a chance to receive SIF money from the government of Canada in the first half of 24? There's been a long time coming, and just wondering what the delays are from.
Well, thanks for the question. And yes, as we've had in our public filings, we've applied for a strategic innovation fund. And I would tell you that the government are certainly champions for what we're doing. I was just in Ottawa last week in a round of meetings with multiple ministers and working inside the Innovation Science Economic Development Ministry specific to that SIF. I can't talk about what's coming, but I am really optimistic about the build plan that we've got going right now, starting in the spring to build out this launch site.
And Ian Huckle asks, when do you anticipate being able to release phase 1 engineering, design, and build tenders?
Great question. So we have tendered and selected a candidate company to help us with the integration process here for the different launch vehicles. So there's two ways to look at it. There's the A&E portion for the facility itself. We've already selected Lindsay Construction as our construction management company, and we're working with them to build those tender packages that'll go out. And then there's the stuff that goes on top of the facility, the specialized propellants and gases and infrastructure pieces that go inside the buildings that we're going to build. And we have selected a company out of the US that's going to be helping us with that design. And then Maritime Launch will be tendering those packages here a little later this year. The phased approach to this is of course, roads, then buildings, and then the stuff that goes in the buildings. But the idea is to have that essentially completed over the next 12 to 15 months.
Colton Redmond wants to know who's providing the fuel for your rocket launches.
We require, the vehicles we're looking at require liquid oxygen for one of the propellants, and those are quite easily obtained here within Nova Scotia and within Canada. There are providers for that. There's actually a company, green hydrogen company we signed an MOU with that is looking at one of the byproducts of their green hydrogen program is oxygen, and creating a way to deliver liquid oxygen in our backyard is one of those prospects that we're looking at. The typical fuel is a high-grade kerosene in some cases, or essentially Jet A. So it's on the order of magnitude and purity of a jet fuel. So those are really quite readily available as well.
And we have a question from Frank asking, what is the profit margin on a launch? You mentioned this, but say again, when do you expect your first launch to actually be?
So the lease model is key to this. So the launch vehicle company, they have their sale price to their end item client. It's $15, $20 million for a rocket full of stuff, right? It's the rocket company that's going to be paying us. They're leasing the facility from us, and then they're paying for that per launch fee. So it's very predictable for us in that we have a lease agreement that covers an entire year, because what are they getting? They're getting support services, they're getting payload processing facilities, they're getting propellants and gases, they're getting the regulatory support to launch this stuff, and they're getting that access to space that they need. So they're paying that lease for that basic service. And then they're paying the labor associated with us doing the control of public access on a per launch basis. So it's that combination of the two and reaching a 16 launch per year launch tempo that realizes that close to $40 million EBITDA.
Thank you. Thank you. Great answer. Charles Chirico asks, how will changing climate and the unpredictable weather associated with that geographical area affect future revenue generation and launch capability?
Well, I've been here since 2018, and I've heard about how cold it was been years ago and how it isn't now. So, in some sense, climate change is making our winters less harsh here. And actually, the coastal climate along in Canso there is really quite receptive to this launch tempo. We can launch in cold weather. That's not a problem. A bad day for us is high wind. There's a wind farm very near us. If they're having an extremely good day at the wind farm, we probably won't launch that day. But that's really one of the key factors that's a consideration most than rain or snow or something else.
And Irv wants you to describe your launch vehicles. Do they vary in size and useful load?
Great question. When you look at that page, it listed all the different rockets that are out there and that are coming online. We're targeting several that are in the 1-ton capacity, so 1,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit. They're smaller. They don't require as much infrastructure to support them, as much propellant to launch them, but they're not tiny rockets that make it hard for the companies to make a profit, and they're not the massive rockets that are Boeing and United Launch Alliance and SpaceX are launching.
And Will Carpenter asks, from where can you accept cargo to launch? What is that logistics like? Is there any inspection of what you're launching required?
Absolutely. There are lots of rules and regulations about what you're launching into orbit that the Canada regulatory regime already covers. They have the same processes in place for delivery of satellites that launch out of the U.S. So there is payload reviews, if you will, and permissions that have to happen. Recognize this has always in the past really been the place of governments of countries to do launch. So, we as a commercial launch site, and there's only one other on the planet, they're working in that regime where we still depend on the government reviews and approvals because they're the ones that sign the treaties for international, cooperation and access to space.
2 questions from David and Jeff. You mentioned you'll be leasing the site. So how much do you anticipate the cost of the lease per launch? And how much revenue do you expect from the lease agreement in 2024?
It depends is the cleanest answer because it really will depend on the services requested by the rocket company themselves. If they want access to our payload processing facility to process their satellites, they're going to need the regulatory support. They're going to want to work out of our launch control center. They're going to want us to provide the propellants to them from our propellant farm, or whether they want to try to work to bring in and cover those pieces themselves. That can vary that price of the lease as well as the per launch costs. So it does vary, but in a general sense, we're looking on the order of a lease cost of $15 million a year U.S., something on the order of $1.5 million per launch cost for the labor and propellants and activity that goes into conducting the launch. And so it's in their best interest then under those launch agreements to launch as many times as they can. Because they're the ones that are selling them for $15 or $20 million to their end item satellite clients. And when they're doing that and they're doing 20 launches a year, you can see where their EBITDA is significant and really justified for their companies to be able to make it work.
Roy asks, of all the rocket manufacturing companies that you've signed LOIs with, which are Canadian?
One is Canadian.
And Evan asks, are there any services the local community could help or need to develop to help the service in this new industry?
Absolutely. There is a significant interest and support from the local community in Guysborough and within the province of Nova Scotia for sure. Even the Stanfield Airport, airside, landside access, satellites coming in and out to how we're going to put people up in the community. We had one launch vehicle company wanting to know whether we're going to have swimming pools and the like for their people that are here on staff for these rocket launches for 6 or 8 weeks before the launch. So it will really depend on that launch company that comes in here and what their needs are. But there is absolutely going to be significant needs from the community. And it, the adage, toilets to toilet paper to tires, you need everything to be able to make something like this work.
Last question, Steve, and this will be a great way to close. Archie asks, there's only one other commercial launch site, so how do you plan to grab business from them and increase your pre-rate market share?
I don't need to grab any business from them. There is massive, massive demand. I'm assuming they're speaking of Rocket Lab. They're in the North Island, the Mahia Peninsula of New Zealand, and Pete's doing a great job with the work that he's got going there. I think he's launched, upwards well over 30 times since in the last 5 years. But there's just so much demand. I'm not taking anybody's shares at this point. We're just responding to the demand.
It's a good problem to have. Steve, thank you so much for your time with us. Fascinating industry you're in right now. We would love to follow you along with your journey with some future updates.
I look forward to coming back very much. Thank you, Anna.
All right, thank you. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.